Okay, guys, today we're going to learn about how things are changing in China. Now, you may remember Mao Zedong, who is the leader of the Chinese Communist Party. He survived the long march in which he was chased all over China by Jiang Jieshi and the Kuomintang. So like I just said, the Kuomintang and the Chinese Communist Party had been fighting for almost 20 years. This was interrupted by World War II. However, after World War II, the Chinese Communist Party was much stronger than the Kuomintang. And Jiang Jieshi was forced to leave with his party to the island of Taiwan. The Kuomintang is still a political party in Taiwan today. So much like Lenin, when Russia became communist, Mao and his communist leaders decided to make some slow, gradual changes in China. In addition, Mao also copied the leadership of the Soviet Union, the Politburo. This is like a board of directors, sort of the most elite and devoted revolutionaries in China. Within a few years of coming to power, you can start to see a shift in China under Chairman Mao. And this started with something called the 100 Flowers Campaign. The perception of this is his quote, "Let 100 flowers to bloom, let 100 schools of thought content." So what this means is he is looking for help. He's looking for people to give good ideas to the government because things in China aren't going so well. Does this sound like a trap? Because it's a trap. In reality, what he is doing is he is looking for people to criticize the government because those are the people who are not loyal to the communist government, and they should be imprisoned. So the reality of this is when he said his goal was to coax the snakes out of their holes, to let the poisonous weeds grow first, and then destroy them one by one, let them become fertilizer. Now, he doesn't send them to their death, so to speak. It's more like a gulag type idea where he sends them to the countryside to perform hard labor and be re-educated. Further, like Stalin, Mao sees that China is very behind the rest of the world when it comes to industrial output. So he starts a series of 5-year plans to catch China up. While China has many assets like the size of their country or the population advantage of China, they never had industrialization. They skipped it, if you remember. And so this is a chance for China to make up for lost time. The most famous of these 5-year plans has to be the second one, in which this is called the Great Leap Forward. And this is when China would use their population advantage to make their country industrial. So the plan for this was to use some of China's labor in the fields and have them stop farming. I said that correctly, to have farmers stop farming. And the idea was for them to instead make steel. So they would get these furnaces like you see right here, and they would create steel. The goal here was to catch up to the USA. This is a better picture of the furnaces. Now, many farmers were made to even burn their own farm equipment so that they wouldn't secretly go and produce their own food. Instead, they had to rely on their communes to get something to eat. A commune is a group, and it's organized within a region, and the government would give that region so much food, and the people would go to the commune to get the food. So you're depending on the government to be fed. That is dangerous. What happened was that the government was inefficient, the steel was of very poor quality, the farmers are better at farming than they are at making steel, and you have poor conditions for growing food. So all in all, approximately 36 million people starved to death in this experiment. As you can guess, Mao lost some popularity because of this, and he's doing anything he can to keep control in China. Right after the Great Leap Forward, when Mao really worried that people were questioning his judgment and leadership, he starts this new program called the Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution. The picture is sort of cut off here. Revolution is what that should say at the top. And this is an uninterrupted revolution. Basically, he is concerned that people in China are getting too lenient, they're getting too comfortable, and he wants to keep the revolution alive. This is very similar to what Robespierre did in the French Revolution. And so what Mao does is he uses terror in order to keep the revolution going. The people who would be spreading the terror are called Red Guards, and they're people like you. They're students. And these students were given weapons, and they were told to go around and destroy old things. They were told to tattle or tell the authorities when their parents criticized the government. They definitely attacked teachers, which is why I'm glad that I'm not in the classroom right now. And as you can see, this guy is holding up, all three of them, a little red book. This is the little red book, as you'll see on the next slide. So it's very appropriately titled because it is little and it is red, and this is a collection of Mao's speeches and wisdom. Now, during this radical period in China, not only did you have to own this, you had to keep it with you at all times, and you had to memorize it. And if a government official tested you on this, and you didn't know what you were talking about, then you were imprisoned or sent to the countryside for re-education. Very much like in the French Revolution, if you weren't wearing the right colors on your clothing, okay? This is very intense because as people have to memorize the little red book, other non-Mao approved books or literature is burned, much like Hitler with his book burning. So as I said, Mao is really turning to people like Robespierre to keep the communist revolution alive, and that is by using terror. So China, as it's had some prosperity, Mao's afraid that people have forgotten their core principles about equality. And as people are becoming more and more unequal in China, he feels like violence will bring them back to their core ideals. And as I said, the students, as the Red Guards, are the ones who are committing all of this violence. Now, if you look at this, what you're looking at is violence, straight up chaos, that in the end cannot be controlled. And so since he can't control all of these teenagers with weapons, shocker, he has to get his army, the People's Liberation Army, to actually stop the Cultural Revolution. The death of Mao will also accomplish the same goal, and Mao dies in 1976. So you have some pretty good propaganda here, okay, and you can see that these are different groups who are showing support for the Cultural Revolution. You can see a picture of Mao in the background. And much like his comrade Vladimir Lenin, Mao received the same treatment. And so even though he died, his body has been preserved and is in Beijing today, if you care to go see it. Mao's successor is a former ally of his whose name is Deng Xiaoping. Deng Xiaoping will be more liberal than Mao, which is really why China is successful today. The big difference in Deng Xiaoping is that he's looking more to the future rather than trying to simply hold on to power like Mao was doing. And the difference when you look at communism is that people will become unequal financially in China as they are today. However, everyone has to listen to the government and follow the government equally. So it's a different version of communism than what we're used to. Deng also starts the controversial one family, one child policy in China, which limits, as you guessed, one child per family. If your family has more than one child, then you pay an annual tax every year. It's estimated that this has saved China 400 million extra people, which with their resources and their limited borders and land would be disastrous towards China today. Now, this is nice in that people in China now have more freedoms. However, the freedom that they don't have are political freedoms. This means the right to vote. Adding to this list would be freedom of the press and freedom of speech as freedoms that the Chinese people still to this day don't have. Now, the Chinese Communist Party under Deng Xiaoping is in a tough position because by introducing some reforms, a lot of people want even more reforms. Some people want less reforms. They want to go back to the ways of Mao. So this is a tough position to be in, one that we'll see a Russian leader called Mikhail Gorbachev in much later. An example of this would be how people in China have very little internet privacy, and the government is looking at what they're doing. You could say in the United States, the same thing has been happening, so it's not all that different. The difference here is that in China, there are certain things that are off limits that the government will not let you even search via Google or any type of search engine. The next topic is one of those items. So setting the stage, in 1989, a former Chinese Communist Party leader called Hu Yaobang died. Who died? Exactly, who? No, I'm asking who. I'm telling you who died. Yes, that's exactly what I'm asking you. All right, I'm sorry. So the reason why Hu Yaobang was important is because he was trying to give people of China more political freedoms. And for this, he was actually exiled by the Chinese Communist Party. So when he died, the students and the people who were in favor of his changes saw an opportunity to mourn his death, but also protest the lack of political development. This all took place in Beijing, not too far from the Forbidden City, called Tiananmen Square. And as you'll see in the next photograph, this is a huge demonstration in Tiananmen Square, and the highlight of this is this statue called the Goddess of Democracy that looks just like the Statue of Liberty, and the protesters held it up to look directly at the portrait of Chairman Mao within the square. In this photograph, you can see just how many people were in the square. You can see tents where people are spending the night, and you can see the Goddess of Democracy here facing Chairman Mao. So this protest was pretty uneventful for about 6 weeks, and then overnight on June 4th, things got real, and the government cleared the square no matter who was around. Now the government says that no one died within the square. Western media shows people dying and being attacked in the square. So since China does not have a good history of open information, no one really knows what happened. You can search on YouTube and see video evidence from that night that people were being attacked. However, the Chinese government still to this day does not admit that. This is one of the most iconic photographs of the 20th century, and this happened on the morning of June 5th when the Chinese government sent in tanks to Tiananmen Square to force anyone else who was in the square to move. This is a man, we don't know who he is, they call him Tank Man, and he had enough and he stood in front of the tanks, basically showing them that he was not afraid. This photograph, by the way, is illegal in China. I've had students of mine from China who told me the first thing they researched when they got to the United States was this event, because if you search for this on Google or any search engine in China, your account becomes flagged and all of a sudden your internet turns off, or maybe you'll get a visit from a government official asking why you're looking up this topic. It is very much off limits for teachers to teach this event in schools as well. Hey, that's everything I just said. And now for the video footage from a Western photographer. Mysteriously, we still today have no idea who this guy is. So I think we can all agree that China has developed a great deal in the last 50 years, and that today China is an economic and military power. However, there's still some things we should keep our eyes on. The first is an overpopulation crisis. China, as you know, has had this problem for centuries now, with so many people and then so little land. Further, since China is going through a type of industrial revolution right now, there are all sorts of environmental issues that are taking place. A lot of pollution in the air and the water and such. As well, like I talked about with computers, political freedoms and rights are very, very limited. And then lastly, territorial issues with places like Taiwan, which is the place where Jiang Jiechi and the Kuomintang went and has been protected by the U.S. ever since, as well as Tibet, where the Dalai Lama is from, continue to perhaps lead to conflict in the future. I hope you've enjoyed this, and I hope all of you are doing really well. I miss you guys, but I know that you will do well in your exam, and this is just the first video, so expect some more coming up soon. Talk to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.